The first tendrils of obsession wrapped around her heart like silken threads, so delicate she almost didn't notice. It began with stolen glances across the crowded cafe, his dark eyes reflecting a hunger she couldn't name. He was a melody she didn't shake, a whisper in the quiet moments of her day that grew louder, more insistent with each sunrise. Dopamine, a treacherous friend, flooded her system with each encounter, painting the world in vibrant hues of anticipation. He learned her rhythms, the way she bit her lip when lost in thought, the precise angle she tilted her head when she laughed. He'd leave small gifts, a single perfect rose on her doorstep, a worn copy of her favorite book slipped into her bag. Each seemingly innocent gesture tightened the silken thread, binding her closer. Oxytocin, the hormone of connection, bloomed within her, a fragile flower pushing through the cracked earth of her past insecurities. But beneath this intoxicating courtship, a disquiet stirred. His attentiveness morphed into a possessive gaze, his admiration into a desperate need. He started appearing unexpectedly, knowing her schedule with unnerving precision. Her friends voiced their concerns, their words like stones thrown into the tranquil pond of her infatuation, creating ripples of doubt. She tried to pull away, a small, hesitant step back into the light, but the thread held fast, constricting, suffocating. His pain was tangible, a shadow clinging to her, whispering of her cruelty, her heartlessness. Guilt, sharp and biting, gnawed at her resolve. Serotonin, the stabilizer, deserted her, leaving her adrift in a sea of anxiety and confusion. Was this love, she wondered, or a twisted reflection of it? Was she falling into his arms, or being swallowed whole? The line blurred, vanished, leaving her trapped in a labyrinth of her own making, addicted to the very attention that threatened to consume her. Dopamine, his drug of choice, coursed through her veins every time his eyes locked onto hers, every time his fingers brushed against her skin. It was a potent, addictive cocktail, masking a deeper, more sinister truth. Was this the man she loved, or a phantom conjured from her deepest insecurities? Attachment theory, she realized with a shudder, wasn't just a textbook concept, but the blueprint of her fractured soul. Anxious, avoidant, disorganized, she was a collage of broken bonds, desperately seeking wholeness in the arms of a man who mirrored her own chaos. Cognitive behavioral therapy, her therapist had suggested, could help untangle the web of obsessive thoughts. But how could she expose herself to the fear of his absence when his presence was the only thing that made her feel alive? He was her exposure and response prevention, her obsession and her compulsion, all rolled into one devastatingly handsome package. Their relationship, she knew, was a textbook case of codependency. He, the needy, wounded bird, and she, the rescuer, forever sacrificing her own well-being at the altar of his affection. The power dynamics were skewed, twisted, leaving her gasping for air in the suffocating vacuum of his control. Love addiction, the article stated, is a real phenomenon, a behavioral pattern, akin to substance abuse, potentially influencing the brain's reward system and transforming affection into a craving. Was she truly in love, or simply chasing the dopamine rush, the fleeting high of his approval? Social media, with its curated portrayals of ideal romance, had warped her perception, blurring the lines between reality and illusion. She craved the validation of likes and comments, the digital applause for a love that was crumbling in real life. He had become her dangerous obsession. The insidious tendrils of codependency had wrapped around her heart, suffocating her sense of self. She had become a caretaker, a fixer, pouring all her energy into mending his broken pieces, while her own lay shattered and neglected. The imbalance of power was a silent scream in their relationship, his needs always eclipsing hers, his voice always louder. It was an addiction, a vicious cycle of need and fulfillment, where love was a drug, and she was a desperate addict, chasing the next fix of his attention. Was this love, or simply a distorted reflection of her own insecurities, amplified by the echo chamber of social media? The curated perfection she saw online, the flawless couples, The grand gestures were a constant reminder of what her own relationship lacked, fueling her obsession to fix, to mend, to become worthy of his love. She was trapped in a digital echo chamber, idealizing a past relationship or projecting an unrealistic image onto the present, fueled by comparisons to curated online content. This wasn't love. This was a form of unhealthy attachment. Her need for a validation, the dopamine rush of his attention, had spiraled into an addiction, a craving as potent as any drug. Like an addict chasing their next fix, she pursued fleeting moments of connection, ignoring the vast stretches of neglect and emotional unavailability. The neurobiology of addiction mirrored her desperate pursuit of love, dopamine pathways firing with each text, each stolen glance, only to crash into agonizing withdrawal when he inevitably pulled away. Intellectually, she knew this wasn't healthy. She'd even stumbled upon articles about love addiction, the symptoms echoing her own behavior with chilling accuracy: obsessive thoughts, crippling anxiety, the utter loss of self in pursuit of another's affection. It was a grim reflection of her deepest insecurities, her desperate need to be loved, to be seen, to be worthy. But awareness wasn't enough to break the cycle. Her anxiously preoccupied attachment style, forged in the crucible of childhood experiences, fueled her desperation. The work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth on attachment theory haunted her, explaining the roots of her desperate clinging. Inconsistent care in childhood had wired her brain to seek constant reassurance, to fear abandonment with every fiber of her being. Then there was the insidious codependency. She had become so fixated on his needs, his moods, his desires, that she'd lost sight of her own. She was the giver, the caretaker, relentlessly trying to fix him, to make him happy, even at her own expense. His needs were a vortex, sucking her in and leaving her depleted and empty. The power dynamics in their relationship were stark, an imbalance that constantly left her feeling small and insignificant. He held all the cards, dictating the terms of their connection, while she scrambled to meet his unspoken demands. It wasn't a partnership. It was a performance, a desperate attempt to earn his love. The digital echo chamber of his affection amplified her insecurities. Each like on social media was a fleeting validation that never truly filled the void. She compared herself to the flawless images he liked, the seemingly perfect women who populated his online world, and felt the familiar pang of inadequacy. Was she enough? Could she ever be the woman he truly desired? Or was she just a placeholder, a temporary distraction in his endless pursuit of something better? Her dopamine receptors fired with each text, each fleeting moment of his attention, creating a neurobiological dependence on his presence. It was a high followed by inevitable lows, the brutal crash of reality when she realized his affection was conditional, a reward dispensed sparingly, keeping her hooked but never truly satisfied. She was caught in a vicious cycle of seeking validation, a rat in a maze chasing the elusive cheese of his love. Her once secure attachment style had warped into something anxious and clinging. She lived in constant fear of abandonment, perpetually scanning for signs that he was losing interest, that she was failing to meet his impossible expectations. The slightest shift in his tone sent her spiraling, triggering a cascade of self-doubt and desperate attempts to regain his favor. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, the bars forged from her deepest fears and insecurities. He had become her obsession, her sole focus, and she was spiraling into the depths of what felt like love addiction. Every thought, every action revolved around him, her own needs and desires fading into insignificance. She was losing herself in the relentless pursuit of his affection, a ghost in her own life, defined solely by her relationship with him. Her reliance on him had become a textbook case of codependency, an unhealthy dependence that blurred the lines of who she was and what she wanted. She existed only in relation to him, her identity subsumed by his needs and desires. It was as if her dopamine receptors fired only when he was near, creating a false sense of euphoria that masked the deep-seated pain and emptiness within. The digital world only amplified her torment. Social media became a weapon of self-destruction, as she obsessively tracked his online presence, comparing herself to the seemingly perfect women who populated his feed. Each like, each comment, each new follower was a fresh wound to her already fragile self-esteem. The echo chamber of her own insecurities reverberated with every scroll, reinforcing the belief that she was not enough, that she would never be enough for him. She knew, intellectually, that this was not love. It was an addiction, a desperate attempt to fill a void within herself with external validation. She craved the high of his attention, the fleeting moments of connection that left her yearning for more. But like any addiction, the highs were short-lived, followed by the inevitable crash of disappointment and despair. And yet, despite the pain, despite the knowledge that she was hurting herself, she couldn't break free. The neurobiology of addiction had taken hold, hijacking her brain's reward system and turning him into the drug she couldn't resist. She was trapped in a vicious cycle of craving, pursuit, and disappointment, each turn of the wheel taking her further away from herself. The power dynamics in their relationship were so skewed that she had lost all sense of her own worth, her own agency. He held all the cards, and she was willing to play any game, no matter how demeaning, to win his affection. Her addiction to him was a twisted cocktail of dopamine rushes and attachment anxieties, a potent mix that kept her coming back for more, even when every cell in her body screamed for her to run. It was a love addiction, plain and simple, fueled by her own insecurities and his carefully curated indifference. She was chasing the high of his fleeting attention, the brief moments when his eyes lingered on her a fraction longer, when his lips curved into a smile that seemed meant only for her. But these moments were rare, unpredictable, like a slot machine that occasionally spat out a jackpot, just enough to keep her feeding it coins. She knew, intellectually, that this wasn't love. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this, a constant ache in her chest, a knot of anxiety in her stomach, a relentless craving that consumed her thoughts. Love wasn't supposed to be a power struggle, a game of cat and mouse, where she was always the one being chased, always the one falling short. But her heart, or rather, her brain, didn't seem to care about logic or reason. The neurobiology of addiction had taken over, rewiring her neural pathways, making him the only source of pleasure, the only thing that could temporarily silence the voices of doubt and self-loathing in her head. She was trapped in a digital echo chamber of her own making, constantly scrolling through his social media, searching for clues, for any indication that he felt even a fraction of what she felt. Each like, each comment, each shared post was dissected, analyzed, and interpreted, often in ways that were completely divorced from reality. The online validation she sought only served to fuel her addiction, reinforcing the false belief that his attention was the ultimate measure of her worth. Social comparison was her downfall. She compared herself to every woman he followed, every woman who commented on his posts, every woman who seemed to effortlessly command his attention. Each comparison chipped away at her self-esteem, making her feel smaller, less worthy, more desperate for his approval. The codependency was insidious, a slow creep that had eroded her sense of self. She had become so focused on his needs, his wants, his desires, that she had completely lost sight of her own. She had become a chameleon, adapting to his moods, his preferences, his whims, sacrificing her own identity in the process. She couldn't say no to him, couldn't assert her own boundaries, couldn't even imagine a life without him. He had become her everything, her reason for being, her sole source of validation. And in that surrender, she had lost herself completely. The realization crashed over her, a tidal wave threatening to drown her in its emotional wake. She was adrift in a sea of codependency, clinging to him like a lifeline, even as it dragged her further from the shores of her own existence. It was love addiction, pure and simple, a chemical craving hijacking her brain, flooding it with dopamine and obscuring the stark reality of her situation. He was her drug, and she, a desperate junkie craving the next fix of his attention, his affection, his approval. Her mind, once a sanctuary of personal thoughts and dreams, had become a battleground of cognitive distortions. She filtered out the red flags, the subtle manipulations, the moments when his needs eclipsed her own. She overgeneralized his kindnesses, magnifying them into proof of love, while ignoring the underlying patterns of control and disregard. She told herself she couldn't live without him, that he was the only one who truly understood her, that she was lucky to have him, despite the pain he inflicted. Fueled by the curated perfection of social media, she played a dangerous game of social comparison. She envied couples who seemed to have it all, their lives meticulously crafted for public consumption, longing for their validation and happiness. She measured herself against them, against the women he followed online, against the idealized versions of femininity society demanded, and inevitably fell short, feeling inadequate, unworthy, unlovable. She clung to him even tighter, hoping his love would somehow fill the void within, but it never did. The truth was, she sought external validation when she needed to find it within herself. Years of self-sacrifice and neglect had eroded her self-esteem. She'd forgotten her worth, her value, her inherent goodness. She allowed him to define her, dictate her worth, control her destiny. In doing so, she lost the most important person of all, herself. She yearned for the secure attachment she'd never known, the unconditional love that had eluded her since childhood. Perhaps fractured early bonds and unmet needs left her vulnerable to unhealthy relationships. Perhaps she was repeating generations-old patterns of codependency, a legacy of trauma and dysfunction. Whatever the reason, she knew she couldn't continue down this path. She had to break free from love addiction's chains, reclaim her identity, rediscover her worth. She had to save herself. She had to confront the cognitive distortions warping her perception of love and relationships, the filters magnifying flaws while minimizing kindnesses, the overgeneralizations painting every potential partner with disappointment and betrayal. She had to dismantle the false narratives taking root in her mind, the lies whispering she was unworthy of love, destined to be alone, needing someone else to complete her. It wouldn't be easy. It would require delving into the deepest recesses of her psyche, confronting lurking shadows, unearthing buried traumas fueling her self-destructive patterns. She needed to examine her attachment style, understanding how early experiences shaped her relational expectations and behaviors. Was she anxiously attached, clinging to others for validation and reassurance, or avoidantly attached, pushing people away to protect herself from vulnerability, or, like so many, caught in a disorganized dance of both, craving connection while simultaneously fearing it? Then there was the insidious trap of social comparison, the endless scroll through curated images of seemingly perfect couples, the constant measuring of her life against others' highlight reels. Intellectually, she knew social media distorted reality, that behind every smiling face lay struggles and insecurities. Yet, she couldn't help feeling inadequate, incomplete, as if failing at the game of love. She had to cultivate self-compassion, treating herself with the kindness and understanding she'd offer a friend, recognizing her humanity, flaws and all, and her deserving of love. She had to validate herself, finding her worth from within, rather than seeking external sources. She had to break free from the addiction to online validation, the dopamine rush of likes and comments, the fleeting approval leaving her empty and craving more. Perhaps most importantly, she had to redefine her understanding of power dynamics in relationships, recognizing that true love wasn't about control or domination, but mutual respect, equality, and collaboration. She needed to find someone who valued her voice, supported her dreams, empowered her to be her best self, without trying to change or possess her. To consciously design a relationship built on awareness and consent, where both partners felt safe, seen, and cherished. The journey wasn't just about mending a broken heart. It was about piecing together a shattered sense of self. It meant confronting the cognitive distortions, twisting her perception of love and worth, the irrational beliefs leading her down a path of self-destruction. She had to recognize the filtering, the way she minimized her strengths and magnified her flaws, the overgeneralizations painting her future in bleak, hopeless colors. It was about rewriting her internal narrative, challenging the negative self-talk echoing in her mind, replacing it with affirmations of self-compassion and self-acceptance. It was about understanding the neurobiology of love addiction, the way her brain had been hijacked by dopamine rushes and obsessive cravings, and learning to rewire those pathways with healthier, more sustainable sources of joy and fulfillment. Perhaps most critically, it was about cultivating genuine self-esteem, not the fleeting validation of likes and comments, but a deep, unwavering belief in her inherent worth. It was about recognizing that her value didn't depend on external approval or romantic attention, but on her unique qualities, her passions, her dreams. It was about building resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks and disappointments, to face life's challenges with courage and grace. It was about understanding her emotional intelligence, recognizing and managing her feelings, and empathizing with others. In the end, it wasn't about finding someone to complete her, but about becoming whole on her own. It was about learning to love herself, flaws and all, and creating a life filled with purpose, meaning, and joy. Only then could she truly open herself up to a healthy, fulfilling, and lasting love. A love that would lift her higher, not hold her captive. A love that was not an addiction, but a genuine connection of souls. But what about the ache? The void that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole? Could self-love truly conquer the magnetic pull of unhealthy attachments, the kind that mimicked love, but were, in reality, a dopamine-fueled chase? She learned that addiction, in all its forms, hijacks the brain's reward system. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of pleasure, became the puppeteer, pulling the strings of desire and driving the relentless pursuit of the next high. Whether it was a substance, a behavior, or a person, the cycle remained the same: craving, reward, and the inevitable crash that left her wanting more. The brain, she discovered, wasn't a static entity. Neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire neural pathways, offered a beacon of hope. With focused effort, she could reshape her thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, even physical exercise became tools in her arsenal, helping her dismantle old patterns and forge new connections. She began to examine her cognitive distortions, the irrational thought patterns that fueled her anxiety and self-doubt. All-or-nothing thinking, catastrophizing, and personalization. She recognized them as familiar foes, whispering lies that undermined her self-worth. Through CBT, she learned to challenge these distortions, replacing them with more balanced and realistic perspectives. Attachment theory shed light on her relationship patterns, revealing the roots of her insecurities and anxieties. Anxious attachment, born from early experiences of inconsistent care, made her clingy and fearful of abandonment. Understanding this pattern allowed her to develop healthier boundaries and cultivate more secure connections. Emotional intelligence became her guiding star. She honed her ability to recognize and manage her own emotions, empathize with others, and communicate effectively. She learned that true connection wasn't about losing herself in another person, but about bringing her whole, authentic self to the relationship. Self-compassion was the balm that soothed her wounded heart. She learned to treat herself with the same kindness, care, and understanding that she would offer to a dear friend. Mindfulness helped her stay present in the moment, without judgment, allowing her to observe her thoughts and emotions without getting swept away by them. And what of social media? The curated highlight reel that often fueled her feelings of inadequacy. She became mindful of its impact on her self-esteem, limiting her exposure and focusing instead on cultivating genuine connections in the real world. It was a journey of self-discovery, a process of unraveling years of conditioning and rewriting her own story. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. For in the end, she realized that true love wasn't about finding someone to complete her, but about becoming whole on her own. It was about breaking free from the chains of addiction and embracing a love that was not a dependency, but a genuine connection of souls. And as she stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, she understood that her journey had just begun. The scars of the past, though still visible, were no longer wounds that defined her. They were maps, guiding her toward a future where love was not a drug, but a sanctuary. She knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. The allure of instant gratification, the dopamine rush of fleeting connections, would always be a temptation. But she was armed now with the knowledge of neuroplasticity, the power to rewire her brain and forge new pathways. She would consciously choose experiences that fostered genuine connection, activities that nourished her soul, and relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. She embraced the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, challenging her cognitive distortions and replacing them with balanced, realistic thoughts. She understood that her worth was not defined by the number of likes on a post or the validation of others, but by her own intrinsic value as a human being. She practiced self-compassion, treating herself with the same kindness and understanding she would offer a dear friend. Understanding attachment theory, she recognized her own patterns in relationships and actively worked towards fostering secure attachments. She sought relationships based on honesty, tolerance, and emotional closeness, knowing that true intimacy was not about dependency, but about vulnerability and authenticity. Above all, she cultivated her emotional intelligence, learning to understand and manage her own emotions, and recognizing the feelings of others. She practiced empathy, resilience, and flexibility, knowing that these were the keys to navigating the complexities of human connection. For she knew that true love was not just a feeling, but a skill, a practice, a conscious choice to show up fully and authentically in every moment. She understood that she wasn't addicted to you. She was liberated to love. And so, with newfound clarity, Elara embraced the principles of neuroplasticity, consciously rewiring the pathways of her brain. She understood that her mind was not a fixed entity, but a dynamic landscape, capable of transformation. She challenged cognitive distortions, those insidious thought patterns that had once clouded her judgment and fueled her insecurities. With the guidance of cognitive behavioral therapy, she learned to identify and reframe these distortions, replacing them with balanced, realistic perspectives. She delved into the intricacies of attachment theory, recognizing how her early experiences had shaped her relationship patterns. She confronted her insecurities, understanding that her worth was not contingent upon external validation. Instead, she cultivated self-compassion, treating herself with the same kindness, care, and understanding that she would offer a dear friend. She practiced mindfulness, anchoring herself in the present moment and allowing her thoughts and emotions to flow without judgment. Elara also became acutely aware of the impact of social media on her self-esteem and mental health. She recognized the potentially addictive nature of these platforms, the way they can trigger dopamine release and fuel a need for validation. She made a conscious decision to limit her exposure, prioritizing authentic connection over fleeting digital gratification. She understood that true self-worth could not be found in likes and followers, but in the depths of her own being. Elara embarked on a transformative journey, exploring the profound power of mindfulness and self-compassion. She learned to observe her thoughts and emotions without judgment, understanding that they did not define her. Mindfulness, she discovered, wasn't about emptying her mind, but about opening her heart to the present moment, embracing the entirety of her experience, both its beauty and its pain. Self-compassion became her sanctuary, a gentle inner voice whispering, "It's okay to struggle. It's okay not to be perfect. You are human, and you are worthy of love and kindness, especially from yourself." She realized how much of her life she'd spent criticizing herself, holding herself to impossible standards. Now, she began to offer herself the same tenderness and understanding she would extend to a dear friend. As Elara cultivated mindfulness and self-compassion, she noticed a shift in her mental state, mirroring scientifically observed effects on brain activity. Consistent mindfulness practice tended to lessen the reactivity of the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while strengthening the prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation and higher-level thinking. Her emotional intelligence blossomed as she became more attuned to her own feelings and those of others, navigating relationships with greater empathy and understanding, and fostering deeper, more meaningful connections. This journey of healing and self-discovery wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, pain, and the urge to give up, but each time, she reminded herself of her progress, the strength she'd found within, and the love awaiting her on the other side of fear. Deep in her heart, she knew she wasn't alone, but part of a vast web of humanity, all striving to heal, grow, love, and be loved. And in that knowing, she found the courage to continue, one breath, one moment, one step at a time. As she journeyed deeper into the labyrinth of her mind, Alara began to understand the intricate dance between neuroplasticity and healing. She learned that her brain, once wounded, wasn't fixed but capable of rewiring itself, forging new pathways of thought and feeling. Like a garden overgrown with weeds, her mind could be cultivated, pruned, and replanted with seeds of self-compassion and mindfulness. She discovered the science behind her struggles, how dopamine, that fickle messenger of pleasure and pain, had been hijacked by her past traumas, creating addictive loops of longing and despair. Social media, with its curated realities and fleeting validations, had only exacerbated the problem, feeding her insecurities and distorting her sense of self-worth. But knowledge, she realized, was power. By understanding the mechanisms at play, she could begin to dismantle them, one neural connection at a time. Cognitive behavioral therapy became her guide, helping her identify the negative thought patterns that had taken root in her subconscious, the insidious beliefs whispering that she was unworthy of love, happiness, and peace. She challenged those beliefs, replacing them with affirmations of self-compassion, reminding herself that she was human, imperfect, and deserving of kindness, especially from herself. Attachment theory offered another piece of the puzzle, illuminating how her early relationships had shaped her current patterns of relating. She recognized the anxious attachment style that had driven her to seek validation in the eyes of others, the fear of abandonment that had led her to cling to unhealthy connections. With gentle self-reflection, she began to cultivate a secure attachment within herself, learning to trust her own intuition, nurture her own needs, and become her own safe haven. Emotional intelligence became her compass, guiding her toward greater self-awareness, empathy, and emotional regulation. She learned to identify her triggers, name her emotions, and respond with compassion rather than reactivity. Mindfulness became her anchor, grounding her in the present moment, allowing her to observe her thoughts and feelings without judgment, and find stillness amidst the chaos. As she practiced self-compassion, she found a wellspring of resilience within herself, a capacity to forgive herself for her mistakes, embrace her imperfections, and love herself unconditionally. She realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it into her present, transforming her wounds into wisdom, and her scars into strength. As Maya delved deeper into the science of her own mind, she discovered the profound impact of neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself, to forge new neural pathways in response to experience. She learned that her brain wasn't fixed, but rather a dynamic, ever-changing landscape, capable of growth and transformation. Inspired by this newfound knowledge, Maya began to explore the power of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a therapeutic approach that helped her identify and challenge the negative thought patterns that had long plagued her. With each session, she gained greater insight into the origins of her anxiety, tracing the roots of her fears back to childhood experiences, to early patterns of attachment that had shaped her sense of self and her relationships with others. Through CBT, Maya also discovered the vital role of dopamine in the brain's reward system, understanding how easily the pursuit of pleasure could become a trap, how the allure of social media, with its endless stream of likes and validation, could hijack her attention and fuel her insecurities. She recognized the importance of cultivating healthier sources of joy and fulfillment, of seeking out experiences that nourished her soul and strengthened her connection to herself and others. Armed with this knowledge, Maya began to rewire her brain, consciously choosing thoughts and behaviors that supported her well-being. She practiced mindfulness, anchoring herself in the present moment, observing her thoughts and feelings with detachment, and cultivating a sense of inner peace. She nurtured her emotional intelligence, learning to recognize and regulate her emotions, to empathize with others, and to communicate her needs with clarity and compassion. She embraced self-compassion, treating herself with the same kindness and understanding she would offer a dear friend. Recognizing her imperfections and vulnerabilities as inherent aspects of the human experience, she released herself from the shackles of self-criticism and embraced her authentic self with unwavering acceptance. As Maya delved deeper into the science of attachment theory, she began to unravel the intricate patterns that had shaped her relationships. She recognized the anxious attachment style that had driven her relentless pursuit of validation, and the avoidant tendencies that had erected barriers to true intimacy. With newfound awareness, she embarked on a journey of healing and transformation, consciously challenging old beliefs and behaviors, and cultivating secure attachments based on trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect. In this symphony of self-discovery, Maya found herself drawn to the transformative power of cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT became her compass, guiding her through the labyrinth of distorted thoughts and destructive behaviors. She learned to identify and challenge the negative thought patterns that fueled her anxiety and depression, replacing them with more realistic and empowering beliefs. With each session, she gained greater clarity and control over her emotional landscape, paving the way for a lasting change and emotional freedom. As she navigated this journey of self-discovery and healing, Maya found solace and inspiration in the melodies of Addicted to You. The song resonated with her on a profound level, reminding her of the intoxicating power of love and connection, and the delicate balance between dependence and autonomy. It became a reminder to approach relationships with mindfulness and intention, to cherish the bonds that nourish her soul, and to cultivate a love that is both passionate and sustainable. In the quiet moments, when the world outside fades away, Maya turns to the teachings of self-compassion. She learns to embrace her imperfections, to forgive herself for past mistakes, and to extend the same kindness and understanding to herself that she offers to others. This practice becomes a balm for her wounded spirit, a gentle reminder that she is worthy of love and acceptance, just as she is. As she cultivates self-compassion, Maya finds a newfound sense of inner peace and resilience, empowering her to navigate life's challenges with grace and fortitude. It is a revelation, understanding that true love begins within, in the quiet sanctuary of the heart where self-acceptance blooms.